So who is currently on your
I gotta revamp my husband list.
Hey, friendo, Steve here.
Hey, Larson.
And you're watching Tom Talks Rubbish.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Trash, and stand back with another interview. This time, I'm joined by Tiffany from Indie Wrestling Corner. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So if we take us back to the beginning, where do you first discover wrestling?
Oh, man. So I go back to the days of watching WWF with my dad. I can't give you exact because it's so long ago. But I remember having my dad watching like Monday Night Raw, and then I guess that was my bonding with my dad. So I used to sit watch with him and ask him like a bunch of questions. And yeah, so like the rest is kind of history with that. So, and then of course friends were watching it too. So
You said you can't pinpoint the exact era. Do you remember who was wrestling?
Well, no, like I know it was in like early 90s. I just can't pinpoint the exact moment of like where exactly it was. But I knew like I can go back to probably like WrestleMania 10, but I was watching a little bit before that. So that's why I say I don't remember exactly. Probably even before that because but 10 always sticks out to me.
Okay. So do you remember where you were when you first watched WrestleMania 10? I assume it was with your dad?
Yeah, that I remember. That I remember being young, watching with dads on Monday nights pretty much.
Okay. So at this time, were you sort of privy to, how do I explain this? Were you sort of privy to the fact that wrestling was a work, or were you one of those that was like, this is just cool? And did you care when you found out it was a work?
It's funny because like I always go back to this, and I always go back to like my dad talking about like after that they would wrestle, and I talk about this every once in a while because I think it's hysterical. Is that my dad was always like, oh yeah, he goes, they beat the crap out of each other, then after they go out and have a big steak. So like being young, and it's like, yeah, oh, that's kind of cool. Like they drink beer, they have steak. I was like, that's kind of cool. Yeah. So it's like I was always kind of told. Well, I mean, I wasn't so young, like I was probably like 10, 11 years old or whatever, So
was your dad up front that like it's fake violence?
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
cool.
I think it kind of was always that thing that it's like, oh, this is like a sport, it's fun. I think obviously now where I am now, I know deeper of how it goes, compared to being like 10 years old.
Yeah, definitely.
Not like knowing, but just watching favorites and it's just really interesting. But my dad was always kind of like, oh, this is, entertaining,
It's entertainment. It's not violence, I suppose.
Yes.
How does that help or hinder your fandom, knowing from the beginning that it's not 100? Oh, I hate using the word. How does it help your fandom?
I know it's kind of hard
knowing that it's a show.
Yeah, it's like I said, I think with the fact of podcasting now and becoming friends with wrestlers nowadays and knowing more, and then like seeing like getting hurt and injuries and stuff like that now, like you're like, oh, it's fake, but it's not, because you see. Yeah.
I hate that. So I struggle when I ask people that question of like,
yeah,
how did you feel when you found out that it was a choreographed show?
Well, I pretty much think that's like it always. Yeah, I think it was always that thing that like my dad was kind of always honest about it, that it was like that. Mm-hmm. So I think I kind of like always kind of knew that, but like to know obviously how deep of it, when you're young, 10, like you're not really understanding till like you get older, like how deeper it gets or whatever. But I think that was always something that like was always told to me like, this is all,
It's a
done
show,
like that.
basically.
Yeah, like it's just a show, pretty much.
How do you think your fandom would have changed maybe if your dad hadn't been up front and maybe you discovered it years down the line, left to your own devices, that it was a show?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. That's an interesting question. I really don't know. I don't know how it would like really change it, if I would have like thought differently, because I think I was still like at that age when I started watching compared to like being really, really young, like being like 4 years old, 5 years old, and like watching that and then having like, like I have a goddaughter, who's 10, and like her watching it, she like really believes it, that it's not, so I don't know, because I guess I never really kind of experienced it, so it's kind of hard to put it into that,
Fair
thought.
dude.
Yeah.
So as we move on in the 90s, what is your consumption during the Monday Night Wars?
I do not watch WWE at all. I don't even watch AEW anymore either.
No.
Like
what
back
was
then?
What was your consumption
Oh.
during like 96 when WCW was around, and when
You know what? I didn't watch WCW like back then. So like I don't know. Like I know like everybody has like I wasn't that fan. I was the only one that I was like I was watching the WWF. I didn't really know. I stopped watching around the Attitude Era, which I know is everybody's like favorite era,
was there a reason for that?
I got older and it was like college life, like work, like I didn't really kind of have time. And I think also I kind of fell out of it because I was like, oh, a lot of my favorites were leaving. So I think just regular life that I just kind of backed up from it.
I think we all forget that like when you're outside the wrestling bubble, regular life takes over. Like sometimes, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you mentioned there that you were stopped watching before the Attitude Era. So what brings you back to wrestling?
So I used to bowl back then, and you'd make a lot of friends and you would talk or whatever, and I had friends always constantly talking about WWE, and I was like, man, I used to watch wrestling. I was like, I fell out of it. I was like, how is wrestling nowadays? They're like, oh, it's good, so with that being said, like I started watching it, and like my friends were like, oh, you're gonna like this one, or you're gonna like this, and watch this. And I was like, okay. And I always remember my friend was like, you're gonna love Seth Rollins. And I was like, okay. And then it was like, he's the champion. Yeah.
So you had that long of a break, really?
I had a long break.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Big gap.
Okay. So as someone that had a break from, say, before the Attitude Era to... I should have let you finish, really. Till like when?
Probably 10 years ago, I want to say. Something like that, yeah.
Till about 2012. What is something that maybe you've gone back and watched on the network or through friends or something that you're like, oh man, I missed out on this. I wish I was a fan during this time. And then what is something that you're like, thank God I wasn't watching during this time?
You know what? I never really went deep back, like I think if I went back, because then I was like, they started telling me about the network and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I was like, that you could go back and you're going to go watch stuff, because I had in storage, like not DVDs, but like VHS tapes from like back then in the days, that you would like record the pay-per-views on your VCR, so it's like, I had like a whole box of those. So I thought it was really cool that they brought this network together, and I was like, oh, you could go back, you could go watch old stuff, and I thought that was like great. But with me, like I wanted to like go back and watch the old stuff that I used to like, like my favorites, like Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon and Bret Hart and 1-2-3 Kid, and things like that. Like those were my favorite years of wrestling.
Yeah, fair enough. What are some similarities to that era of wrestling that you now notice in the current era of wrestling?
Oh, it's so different. It's so different. Like, man, I can't even like pinpoint it. Just like the watching of it is just move sets and the way that people are built. And then of course, like women's wrestling, like you see more women actually wrestling and actual athletes, and it's like, big gap. So like compared to then to now, it's drastically changed. And then you still see some of the people still around, whether that they were doing like signings or they show up every once in a while in the indies. I've seen like,
we'll get to that.
Yeah,
we'll
so many.
that. So with your with the fact that you didn't watch during the Attitude Era, something I am really curious to know is obviously, and being careful how I phrase this question, with the way women were portrayed, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
If you were watching during then, do you think that might have been a turnoff for you?
No, I think it's awesome, like the growing, because like back then, right? Like from when I was watching, a lot of them were valets.
Yeah.
And then, of course, then the whole thing of the bras and panties matches and stuff, like, yeah, that's not my cup of tea. But again, like my mind frame now of like how I look at it is like different than maybe what I've looked at it back then.
Yeah.
And that it's not just, obviously it was sex sells, but it's just so constantly different now. Like they're athletes, so massive change.
Before we get into your work with Indie Wrestling Corner, you mentioned there that you don't watch really the two biggest promotions, which is AEW and WWE. Is that for a specific reason?
I fell off the WWE train completely because I just hated the same stuff over and over again. I was hating the storylines, and listen, that's not a knock to anybody, obviously. Like I always tell people, enjoy what you like to enjoy. I didn't enjoy it anymore for a while. Like then I was just watching NXT. Like I fell off the main roster. I was watching NXT for till years ago. And like once Johnny Gargano and Ciampa kind of like left NXT, that's when I kind of like fell off the wagon. And then AEW came around, which I used to do an AEW podcast, and I kind of stopped. But I think what happened is, for me with like AEW, because there's a lot of my favorites over there still from the indies, as I like to say. I feel like when AEW first came about, it was like a super indie, and that's what I liked about it. And then I just felt like all the indie people that I was so invested in kind of got pushed. And then it became a lot of like WWE stuff going on. And I was like, okay, I'm not liking this. I like the joy of building a character, building a person, so I think that's what happened to me, because I really was watching like AEW for a while. I just, like I said, I fell off not that long ago that I was like, yeah.
What could both promotions do to get your fandom back?
I have no idea. That's horrible. Okay. I don't know. I really don't know. I know everybody keeps telling me like to try like NXT again because they're like NXT's good. That's getting better. Maybe, I'm too invested into the indies right now, I think.
Speaking of, that's a very nice segue there, really. So how do you get involved and first connect with indie wrestling as a fan before any of your work with Indie Wrestling Corner?
Yeah. So when I got back into wrestling, I was dating a guy, and his friend was roughing. So one day he was saying, "Oh, come." He was like, come watch me ref. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I was like, where do you ref? And he was like, yeah, like there's, so I didn't know about independent scene at all. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like, cool. I was like, let's go. And then the guy I was dating at the time. And then I was like, oh, he's like, I don't really want to go. And I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, that's your friend. And he was like, but he's not wrestling. I was like, that's your friend. You go support your friend. And I was like,
yeah, definitely.
How do you not support your friend? So that's how it kind of like started. Cause it was like, okay, like we went to go support the friend. And then he was taking me, we used to go do House of Glory, which used to have signings of a lot of the WWE guys. So that would draw people in. They're like, oh, okay, well, we got this WWE guy that came in, and check it out. Like, you paid for your ticket. Now you get to watch an indie show. So those were like, like two of the places that I was going to. So the one that my friend worked at was a SWA, which went away for a long time and just started back again, apparently. So,
I'm assuming pandemic had a reason for that, or
no, this is like before, like they just stopped
okay,
for like the
okay.
longest. And but yeah, so that was like kind of like my first like indie promotion, and then I started going to the House of Glory shows. So, but that's really what it was. It was drawing me in because at that time I kind of only knew the WWE people.
Yeah. So when it comes to the indies themselves, what were some similarities you noticed from watching mainstream wrestling, and then what were some of the biggest differences?
Well, the biggest difference obviously is you're in smaller places. Sometimes there's 20 people in the fans, you know, like, so big difference, more intimate. You know, obviously, you know, you definitely see the difference between working a TV level up against an independent scene where it's very different, the styles, where obviously a bunch of them, they'll come and they'll incorporate their stuff into mainstream. But they all get trained a little bit differently also for TV. So I definitely notice that. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I know like every once in a while, like if I showed up somewhere, like somebody would be on mainstream if they like, I mean, like, especially like AEW stuff. Like I see AEW people all the time in the indies, like now, you know, and it's like, but then you might have known them, you know, before the fact, like Orange Cassidy, like I used to follow when he was the IWTV champion, and he used to do ICW before what it is now, the ICW, because now it's the no holds barred with the death matches and stuff like that. So it was owned by another guy, Jack Sabbath. So I saw a lot of the guys that were AEW before they were AEW bound.
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
Do you think, as maybe going back to your non-mainstream fandom, no, to the fact that you're not a mainstream fan anymore, do you think that might be a reason you fell out of AEW a little bit? Maybe they brought in more mainstream guys and less indie talent.
Maybe that's probably like what it is. And then I just got too invested in
that sounds like a
all the
therapy
indies.
question. I do apologize.
I need the couch. Let me go lay down. No,
that does sound like a therapy question. I do apologize.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, I don't know. It probably like plays like, because I just kept getting more and more invested into like the indies and like, you know, some of the storylines, because, you know, a lot of different people coming in, different promotions, all this different, you know, different things going on in the indies compared to mainstream. So you can follow different stories.
Do you think the indies have become popular again purely because of the technology we have access to, or do you think maybe the quality of indies going up has helped?
Oh, it's both. It's definitely both, because obviously I didn't know anything about the indies, and you know, that's one of the things that you can watch indies all over the place. YouTube, Twitch, you know, Fight TV, High Spots, IWTV, like it's endless of where you can watch the indies, so it's more accessible. And then there's a lot of people that I get it all the time, like, oh, I didn't know that the indies existed. So that's definitely helped. But even like mainstream, you know, like you said, like, well, the network was like such a major thing, which I know is like kibosh now, right? Like, a Peacock, right?
In the UK, in the UK, it's still a thing, but I understand that the Americans still it's on a streaming service.
It's like
now.
The Peacock, yeah.
Yeah. So with your journey in the indies, have you had any experience working a show at all?
I get backstage at a lot of promotions, and especially I put a lot of that on my podcast, so I have that access in that sense. I've done commentary for a promotion before. It wasn't for me.
Okay.
You know, I've worked, you know, merch tables for wrestlers before. Haven't got that backstage for like a promotion yet. So I keep being told I'm going to be one, and then it just never happens.
Why wasn't commentary for you? Just out of personal curiosity.
I think I'm very bad. Me personally, I just feel like I'm very bad of names of moves. So I feel like that would be a really bad role for me to sit behind the commentary. And if that's like what someone's looking for, I mean, I know I could sit there and be color, but I think maybe I'd probably be a little bit better now than what I did it for that time.
Was this a few years ago then?
Yeah, it was a few years ago. So it's very
Okay.
different now with all the knowledge that I have, but I still feel that way. I still feel like I'm very bad with names of moves and, you know, so it just, like I said, I learned that early that it's just not for me. And it's been asked a couple of times to do it and I don't want to do it.
That answers my follow-up question, I'm not going to lie, which literally was, if the opportunity came up again, would it be something you'd consider?
I think it'd have to be like really, really right. It's got to be the right situation, you know? Like I think if like one of my friends that's a wrestler is planning a show, you know, like their particular show, because you see a lot of that, like the wrestlers throw out their own show. And if I feel very comfortable with everybody on the roster, then maybe. But probably not.
Fair enough. So we have gone all around the houses on this. I do apologize. But how does Indie Wrestling Corner start?
How does the Indie Wrestling Corner start? Okay. Yeah. So it was another channel that I used to do with somebody else, and we used to just do AEW stuff. And we started doing a little bit of interviews with AEW people. We had Brandon Cutler on, we had Rick Knox on. And I would get messages all the time from the fans say, would you do other interviews? And I was like, well, I'm only doing AEW stuff. I was like, so, because they would like ask random names. And I'm like, well, we're only focused on AEW. So that's what kind of started me to branch a little bit to open up into the indies.
Yeah.
So that's how I started like randomly messaging wrestlers, asking them if they would do podcasts. But it was very like random on the channel. About a year ago, I rebranded the channel to the Indie Wrestling Corner because the other person left and they went to go do other stuff. But I had so many interviews and I had so many backstage stuff on the channel that they gave it to me. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna focus on the indies. I was like, because I was going to a lot of shows and I was doing so many interviews and I was getting backstage, I was doing panels and all sorts of crazy things on the channel for the indies. So, and here I am.
Fair enough. How do you connect with Jameis?
Oh, so Ashley had put a post out about starting up an indie wrestling conversation podcast, you know, and she had like tweeted out, you know, interests of it. And of course, I got tagged a bunch of times with it. And so me, Ashley, and Jameis do a podcast on Ashley's Twitch channel for TWM Plus. So we do it every other week randomly, and we just talk about the indies.
What a guy, by the way.
Oh, he's great.
There'll be an interview around the time this is going out with him, and he is just a great guy. He has been so helpful with my work with Body Slam and stuff like that. I don't want to put him over too much in case he watches this and like don't want to give him a big head.
Do you know what I mean?
So with your work with Indie Wrestling Corner, what would you say it currently is? Is it sort of just like a week in review show? Is it sort of like we talk about what's on our mind when it comes to the indies? How would you describe it?
So mostly my focus, the main baby on it, is my Under the Rope series, where I interview wrestlers, promoters, referees, backstage, all important people in the indie, you know, in the indies in general. Like it's not just like wrestlers, you know, like, you know, I'll have promoters come on. So a lot of people like they'll listen, they'll learn a little bit about, you know, whoever's on there. It's just focused on the indies as a whole. I mean, I've had people that work like GoPro Wrestling, where they do all the camera work and the audio work for promotions. So I've had people like that on. And then, like I said, I also do backstage stuff too. So like I'll go to a show, you know, and I'll do backstage interviews. Some of it's funny, some of it's serious. You never know what's going to happen on it. So most of my live interviews are usually during the week because I work around the wrestler's schedule, and mostly on the weekends, like I'm at shows. And then like I'll put together videos depending on the promotion if I'm backstage, and then like I'll put that up sometimes on the weekend if I'm at a particular promotion.
What's your prep like for interviews, and how does it differ when you're interviewing a different, what's the word, someone different within the industry, whether it's a wrestler, promoter, or referee, for etc.
So I kind of have a straightforward approach to my interviews because everybody has a different story. So I kind of like always go back to like basics with a lot of guys, how they got into wrestling, advice, because there's always fans that are, and students too, that they listen to my interviews too. So students look for advice from so-and-so, whoever it is, even if it is a referee. It's like, well, maybe I want to be a referee. How do I become a referee? So these are like, questions that I ask. So some of them are redundant, in that sense, but like I said, everybody's got a different story. So, I usually like prep way in advance because I like to prep in advance, and I give time because sometimes like I'll think of like questions like weeks out, and then I just set everything up on the computer and I write all my questions. So everything's written out. I do that for everybody.
How, with everything being written out, are you comfortable if like a wrestler or if someone basically goes in a direction you weren't expecting, are you able to go in that direction, or do you find that difficult?
No, I'm pretty much good. Sometimes like a lot of wrestlers just say anything particular that they actually want to talk about, or whoever comes onto the podcast. So, or a lot of times I check too, because sometimes some things maybe I don't want to talk about. So that's always like a respecting with me that I always ask them that. But I mean, I'm a freaking giggle box, pretty much anybody that like knows me. So it's more of, it's supposed to be a leisure, fun, let's sit, like we'll get the serious questions in too, but I expect like to sit and laugh with these guys and have a good time too, because they're taking their time out to sit and have a conversation with me. So I want them to have fun, and I want them to laugh too, even if they're in character. I mean, I get ripped sometimes, from the heels, which is kind of very entertaining. And sometimes I get taken back, but it's hysterical. But it makes the interview interesting. I don't want it to be a boring, monotone kind of podcast, This is not me.
I have never done an in-character interview, so I am curious to know, how do you ask in advance if a wrestler's going to be in character? They usually
tell me. They usually just tell me. Like I have one coming up, and they were like, most of the time, like a lot of times they don't stay in character. Usually they are who they are, and they're very straightforward with their answers or whatever. Like
how does your interviews differ if the person is in character?
I fought back sometimes on the podcast, so that makes very enraging sometimes. But it makes it very entertaining. Charles Mason's probably like the one that always sticks out to me, because one of my whole gimmicks is the whole list of husbands, and I have a list of wrestlers that I'm put on my husband list, so it's a big joke, and Mason was one of them that was on there, and he started making fun of it, and I cursed him out on the podcast, but it was all good fun. Like I knew he was in character, and I just didn't expect that to come at me. And I just went at him, and I went into fan mode of me going to a show and watching him and fighting him at shows, because that's what I do. Not fist fight, like verbal fight.
I know what you mean. You brought up there your wrestler husband list. So who is currently on your
I got to revamp my husband list. So right now, like that, because it's constantly changing. It's constantly changing. Anthony Gangone will forever be my number one husband. And now I have the 4 horsemen, I call it. So Gangone, Arcadia, Alex Zane, and JT Dunn are on my 4 list of husbands. But my list of husbands is like ridiculous because it's constantly changing and constantly getting added to it. So I kind of gave up with my list.
You never know. You could become like Kim Orton, for example. Do you know who that is if I say
that? The talk show, Kimmel?
No, Randy Orton's wife.
Oh!
Kim Orton, I said.
Oh, I said Kimmel. I was like, oh.
No.
You never know.
Never know.
You never know.
So let's reverse that. Who is not on your wrestler husband list?
Everybody and everyone. You know, I think it's more funny to put it this way because I get people that ask me, are they on the list of husbands and why they're not on the list of husbands?
What, wrestlers or
yes,
fans have asked you?
yes, wrestlers. No, forget the fans because the fans know it's a wrestler based thing, you know. But I had wrestlers on interviews. Shout out to Johnny Santos and Matt Awesome because I think that was my 7th interview. And they were sitting there. They were like, "Are we on the list of husbands? Like, are you an ass man?" They were like, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
Oh geez, that made me laugh far too much. Like, when that happens, do you have a moment where it's like, "I'm going red. This shouldn't be happening"?
You know what? The first time that the whole list of husband thing happened was on the first interview. Because with Anthony Gangone, he didn't really know me. But I was a fan of him for so many years. And so his like first actual interaction with me, because I used to never really kind of like go up to wrestlers and stuff like that. So it's a lot better than what it was like back then. He just the guy that used to do it with me, he threw me under the bus to get going, and you just see me turn beet red like on the podcast, like throwing my head down on the table, and I'm like, oh my god, this is not happening right now. But he was a good sport with it, you know, and he was having fun by the end of the podcast, and he asked me if I was his number one. So that's why I always say like we locked him in, because I remember one time like I changed it and I put Zayn as number one, and then like we were saying the universe was in the right mind, that there was like Gangone lost all his belts and Zayn broke his foot and everything like that. We're like, the world is not in order. We got to put Gangone back in number one. So then I locked him in. And we had always said like, Gangone's my number one. Can't change it. But yeah, it's very entertaining for me how it kind of blew up.
Why do you think the wrestler husband list blew up so much?
Because Gangone blew it up and made it something, and then wrestlers would get jealous that they're not on the list, and they would ask, how do they get on the list? It was just, I think that's really what it was, that the wrestlers, there's a bunch of wrestlers that wanted to be on the list just to see their name on the list, that I guess like they felt like, because I would talk more about the particular list of husbands, right? We all have favorite wrestlers and stuff like that. So that's like the same thing. It's like, why am I not on Tiffany's husband list? Like,
fair enough.
So ridiculous.
You talked about it being ridiculous and stuff, but like, are you happy that is what you are known for?
Yeah.
Is there a bit of a moment that like,
of course,
this is my life? What did I do? Sort of thing.
Oh, because it's entertaining. It's like, it's ridiculous, but it's entertaining as hell. And then I think what happened is a lot of the fan base wind up jumping into, and I would get random tweets like, Tiff, I updated my list of husbands or my list of wives or whatever it was, like, or like I had somebody said like, oh, you know what? I don't care. I'm just doing a list in general. And then they said a husband-wife list, and they mixed in the two. They're like, I'm not biased. And I was like, good for you. I was like, I love this. So it was nice to see that the fans were having fun with it too. And then like, even like wrestlers were getting in on it. Like, you know, like, I feel like that needs to come back on my podcast, actually. Like, now that I'm thinking about it, I need to start asking the wrestlers that, because I did it with one of the H2O students, and they started coming into other interviews for H2O guys, and they were like, okay, give the list, give the top 5 list of husbands or the top 5 list of wives. And it was like a bit that I would go to the shows and do backstage stuff, and I would ask it backstage too. I'm like, okay, I have a list of husbands, so who's your top 3? You know, like, I want to know. And they're like, I don't want to answer. No, you got to answer.
Oh dear. Have you ever had a wrestler not be a good sport when it comes to that?
That not been a what?
Not been like a good sport if they're on your list.
Oh yeah, I've had that where I've like fought with people. I had a wrestler yell at me and told me to take me off their husband list, and I was like, wow,
oh, really?
Yeah. It's like, damn.
Oh wow.
Like, that was mean. I was like,
yeah.
It's like, okay, like,
yeah. Not a bit of fun.
I still don't know why that was a thing, but okay.
In all seriousness, if the opportunity to date a wrestler came up, would that be something you'd be comfortable with, or is it like this is a joke?
This is a joke.
And
This is just fun.
I wouldn't actually want to date a wrestler, not to steal your gimmick, not to sabotage your gimmick almost.
Well, it's not even the list that I'd be worried about, you know. I don't want to break anybody's like bubbles with that or whatever like that. That, there's a lot that you hear backstage and word gets around and this and that, and it's like I've watched a lot of it, so it's best to kind of stay out of that dating pool.
Fair enough.
So yeah, if it happens, it happens, but I don't advise it to anybody.
Fair enough. So, as someone that has had both very big fandoms with WWE when they were younger and AEW at certain points and the indies, what has been your favorite time in your fandom? Was it the indies or your mainstream fandom?
I guess I'm gonna say the indies. I mean, I'm not gonna say like there aren't moments of everything that, everything has its special parts, I remember meeting Owen Hart, a few weeks before he passed, that they was doing so like I have, I remember the magazines that they used to have. I have like that autograph in there. It's in plastic in my storage, because I have that. So it's like, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, just moments, then I have like a moment with AEW where I met the Young Bucks, and I did the Matt autograph because it was important to me from the Being the Elite, if you were watching the YouTubes of Being the Elite. So I had Matt do the Matt autograph with me. And I still have that, like, I can't show it right now, but I have a thing here that I had him sign the pop for me.
Sweet.
So like that, like I have moments like that, and I have like so many moments in the indies, like that I can go back, and it's just like the littlest things, again, like the List of Husbands, with that spoof going on, and wrestlers coming up to me, whether before they have a match and they hug me, or after a match that they hug me, or they particularly do a move that they know that I'm going to enjoy, just to hit it for me, like just things like that. Or wrestlers coming up to me, but well, everybody was obsessed with bridges on toes, and I had Travis Huckabee come up to me, and he goes, I had to think about it. He's like, did I give you a bridge? He goes, I think I gave you a bridge. So I have wrestlers that shows me like wondering, like, shit, did I hit that freaking move for her? Or like, here, like, so things like that. Or they'll tell me like after, they're like, I heard you. They're like, I heard you and I hit that move, So it's like the littlest things that it's like, oh, I feel special that, you thought of me, or, moments like that. So I think in every aspect, every piece has that special moment to me.
Fair enough. Mm-hmm. As we look at wrapping this up, because I do want to be respectful of your time, we're going to do a very quick segment that I call Generic Questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before will know this is where I ask my guests their favorite wrestling match, favorite wrestling pay-per-view, favorite wrestling theme song, favorite tag team, and favorite superstar or wrestler of all time. Mm-hmm. Basically questions that I'm sure Tiff might get asked on social media quite regularly. So now she'll have a place to be like, look, I've answered this. Please go watch this. So, awesome. What's your favorite match of all time?
Oh, God. You know what? We're going to go all the way back because I feel like it's so crucial into my story. I'm always going to go back to WrestleMania 10, Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels, ladder match. I just feel like that's like my main memory of like wrestling, and it always like stuck out to me, and it was really like one of my favorite moments. I mean, obviously there's a million. Yeah, we're going to go with that today.
Favorite wrestling pay-per-view of all time?
I'm gonna I guess go back. It's kind of hard with indies because a lot of them aren't doing like the same stuff over and over again. You know what? No. We're gonna go. We're gonna do All Out because I'm gonna go back to like when I experienced All Out.
Let me guess. 2021.
Is it 2021? That was last year. No.
Is it last year?
No. Was it 2 years? It was before the pandemic.
Which one are we talking about?
Before the pandemic.
2019?
Yeah. Is that like before the pandemic? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I saw Young Bucks versus the Lucha Bros in
The ladder match.
ladder match.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. That was favorite because that was such a great experience.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Why does that one speak to you so much then?
Because I guess like I was doing the AEW podcast and I love the Young Bucks and I got to meet up with Maria, who lives in Denmark, who does she does a lot of the fan art that she does also for Matt and Nick, and she does the outros for Being the Elite.
Ooh.
So like being there with her and like meeting her in person and stuff like that, I think that's why that plays such a overall great pay-per-view for me.
Yeah. Favorite wrestling theme song of all time? When I say theme song, I mean like wrestler's theme, not like a show theme.
Yeah, I'm thinking like Shawn Michaels, because that was always the one that you were like bopping to, whatever. Then he would come out running, dancing, and the flashy outfits and all that. So yeah, and I had the CD. Remember the CD the first CD that they came out? I probably broke the CD because I played it so many times.
It makes a change. People saying I didn't break a DVD, so that's quite cool. Favorite wrestling tag team of all time?
Oh, I'm gonna get shit for this. I am a Miracle Generation tag team girl. There's so many tag teams in wrestling, but right now, like, I am all Miracle Generation. Obviously, if you look at my Twitter profile, I'm with the Miracle Generation. Those are my boys. I love them very much.
Favorite, and then as we wrap this up, favorite wrestling superstar or wrestler of all time?
Damn, this is too many. There's too many. I can't. I guess we're gonna have to go with Anthony Gargone because he will always be special in my heart in wrestling in general.
Fair enough. So as we wrap this up, the question I end all my interviews on is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general. We're all sort of gonna live forever in some sort of very weird way. So what is one piece of content from your good self that you want the good people to check out? And then what is one that you're like, if you could avoid that, I would appreciate it?
Oh, I don't know. All right, so one that I like and which one I don't like, pretty much? Or?
Pretty much, yeah. That might be a simpler way of asking that question.
They're all good. Like, I can't really say anything like bad about ones. I mean, the ones that I don't want anybody to check out, I pull off because either people got outed, with the what's it called, the speak out movement. So when things like that happen, I remove them off the channel. So you're not gonna see that because they're hitting, because there's a couple of them that people got outed and I had to take them down. I don't know, like they're all special. Everybody plays a special role. Like I said, I'm almost at episode 200 from the End of the Rope series.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's nuts. Again, every interview is special. Like, I just had Nick Wayne on. I love him. Casey Kirk just won the ICW championship, so she was on. Anytime I do Alex Zane, he's amazing. Alex Zane's been on the podcast multiple times. Yeah, those are some of the great ones that if you want to like check it out. And like I said, the ones to avoid, I took down.
Enough. That's probably a very cool way of looking at it. So as we wrap this up, Tiff, where can the good people find you and all your content?
I'll probably be at an indie show. No.
Fair enough.
No. So you can find the Indie Wrestling Corner. I'm on all the platforms: YouTube, Twitch, Periscope, Google, Apple, all those. So just search Indie Wrestling Corner. And you can find me on Twitter at Loves to Dream 82, LUVS, the number 2, Dream 82. So that's where I mostly interact.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talk Trash. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talk Trash. Follow bodyslam.net for my show with Cassidy Haynes, the Wrestle Watch Pod, on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And follow the Wrestle Watch Podcast on Twitter to help us pick the match that we're going to watch every week. And I will see you in the next one. A goodbye.